We stand on the brink of a technological revolution that will fundamentally alter the way we live, work and relate to one another. The digital revolution has become known as the fourth industrial revolution and has caught up with Africa in a myriad of ways that present both challenges and massive opportunities. In sub-Saharan Africa, mobile technology has evolved rapidly, but this has not happened to internet access. With 170 million users, internet penetration in Africa is at around 28%, which is significantly lower than the global average of 50%, and only 1 in 10 households is connected to the internet. In fact, it's been estimated by experts that 60% of people in sub-Saharan Africa will still lack a data connection in 2020. Yet, despite this, there are educational institutions, some private sector international ones too, like Pareto University, that have created virtual online classrooms and are determined to revolutionize education via its digital tertiary educational offering. So the question is, how ready is Africa to digitize educational offerings? Well, to discuss, I have with me in studio Philani Sagweni, Chief Operations Officer of Fundi, an organization that offers educational loans for all levels of tuition, that is school, university and college. Welcome. Great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me, Noshina.
Now that was a mouthful, and the question is Africa ready to digitize education is a loaded one. So, because there are massive challenges, as I've mentioned. So to begin, tell us to what degree are we seeing education becoming digitized in Africa and in South Africa in particular?
I think we're seeing a great move towards the right direction. We've seen examples of, private and public educational institutions going into digitizing education. We've seen MEC Panyaza Lesufi in Gauteng really speak about digitization. He's launched a few pilot projects here in Gauteng. We've seen companies like GetSmart, which is a South African company, offers online or digital education, actually being bought by an American investor in the tune of hundreds of millions of rands, which shows that the direction that we're going in is definitely the right one. We're also seeing in our space as Fundi, where we've been funding a lot more, instead of just tuition, we've been funding and books, we've been funding actual devices that enable digitization of education, devices such as laptops, tablets, and so forth. So we've seen that demand for that rising a lot faster than the demand for physical books. So there's definitely a move towards the right direction.
Definitely, that is a significant move. I remember in my days, it was all about motivating how you could get funded for your textbooks.
Exactly.
And now students are being funded for laptops and iPads. That's absolutely amazing. I think perhaps you can expand and tell us why within the African narrative is this agenda to provide e-learning to students via the internet such an important one in Africa? So
it's important for various reasons. Number one, you mentioned the fourth industrial revolution. It means that the jobs of the future are going to be fundamentally different than the jobs of the past and the jobs that we have currently. Therefore, it means at a very young age, our kids or students need to be technologically savvy, be comfortable with technology, understand how it works. That's the one element. The second element is the demand for education on the continent, with population estimated to going to double over the next 15 to 20 years. The pace of building physical school and university infrastructure is not going to keep up with the pace of the rate of growth of the youth population on the continent. So if you can use technology to augment that, it's one way to actually try and keep up with the demand for education.
We have a huge skills gap in Africa. So the question that comes to my mind is, are teachers properly skilled to actually capitalize on this digital revolution? I grew up in an era where we hardly used computers or smartphones, and I'm still in the process of also upskilling myself. So I'm assuming teachers lived in the era that I lived in. Are we seeing them taking initiative to upskill themselves?
That's certainly one of the greatest challenges of digitizing or innovating education on the continent. I think I'm similar to you. The first time I turned on a computer was when I went to first year university. I'd never touched it before. I'd read about it in a book. So you're seeing also the impact of that is that our teachers were trained for a different era, to teach for jobs of a different era, for skills of a different era. So We know that about 30% of teachers have been trained in basic ICT skills, particularly in South Africa, but only 7% are actually at intermediate level. So you can already see that there's a huge challenge in upskilling teachers. The one positive aspect of all of that is that you're seeing recognition by both the department and all the players, so private sector players such as ourselves and our sister companies as well, that there's a need to upskill teachers. So there's been a lot of projects being piloted in partnership with the public sector to try and upskill teachers. And we're also seeing a demand in the loans that we give out. We're seeing a demand from teachers who are studying further, who want to study ICT-related skills as well. So as much as we still have a long way to go, I think the recognition, first of all, that you've recognized that it's important, and the teachers have recognized that it's important for their own careers and their own advancement, I think we'll then start to move in the right direction, definitely.
I mentioned another massive challenge in my intro, that is deepening internet penetration. What is holding Africa back from realizing the full potential of achieving that?
I think the one massive one is actual physical internet infrastructure. So bandwidth, because for digital education to work in classrooms, you need always on, reliable, fast internet access at the school level, and we currently don't have that as a country. Even worse if you start going further north into the rest of the continent. But as I said, because there's recognition of the need of this, you're seeing various players on the continent, as well as people coming from outside, such as Facebook. They're investing in a satellite that's going to beam Wi-Fi to the continent. Hopefully, through an organization they call internet.org.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll be able to utilize that. But also in South Africa, you're seeing a few public-private partnerships between our telecoms providers and the government to try and provide internet access to the schools. So that has been the biggest challenge. Our infrastructure is not there yet. But I think with a focused effort, a well-coordinated effort between the private sector and the public sector, we should be able to solve the problem.
When I started this discussion with you, I said the question is a very loaded one.
Yeah.
And we began discussing the level at which we are currently seeing efforts being made to digitize education.
Yeah.
But that's just scratching on the surface, isn't it? Institutions like the Pareto University and the Virtual University of Africa, they offer virtual classrooms as well. Are we seeing more universities take up this modality of teaching where you actually have that live interface connection with your teacher via virtual classroom?
Yeah.
And just how much can we digitize education?
I think from a technology standpoint, there's endless possibilities in terms of how you can use virtualization or a virtual classroom to connect an instructor who's not close to you, who's probably in another country, with a student who's in a rural environment or who can't physically access the physical educational institution. You are seeing a response from our universities as well to go into the space. Some of them are partnering with sort of MOOC providers, so online course providers from across the world. Harvard University, MIT, Stanford has made their online courses available to anyone across the continent. I mean, there's a story of a young man who actually, by the time they went to MIT, had completed all his first-year courses online.
Yeah.
So you are seeing that movement. But again, I think the issues around funding for this thing, the issues around the readiness of the lecturers within the local context and the teachers to be able to provide this is still a limitation. But again, I really believe that the possibilities are absolutely endless. Another thing that we've seen is that when people talk about digitizing education, some people are talking about taking a book and just putting it on a tablet. That's not what we mean by proper e-learning. Proper e-learning.
And are we seeing that happen in the space?
So you are seeing.
So there are different ideas about what digitizing means in the education space.
There are different ideas or understanding at this point. You are seeing movement. So the movement is slightly, the pace of the movement is different depending on where you are. So Gauteng, Western Cape, because of the better infrastructure, you're seeing better movement there. But also there's a slight divide between the private and the public sector, because the private sector can move a lot quicker. So you're seeing a lot of players coming in, Nova Pioneer Academies being one, Future Nation schools being the other, where they've actually moved a lot faster than the public sector schools. But because there's recognition, I think as the department starts to reprioritize how they budget and what they budget for the schools, you're going to see the budget move towards digitization as well. But yeah, I think over the next 10 to 15 years, schools in South Africa particularly, and also in the continent, will start to be fundamentally different to what we see today.
I think in this revolution that we're now in, the digital revolution, when we're talking about disrupting a sector, we tend to use it very loosely without really fully understanding the deeper implication of this. And now when we're having this discussion about digitizing education, immediately you're thinking technology, which is natural, etc. But I suppose the deeper question for us to explore right now is, how does this technology really disrupt the delivery and the quality of education that people are receiving? And I think that is the bigger question that we need to look at, so that we can talk about where educators need to be taking education to actually solve this education crisis in Africa.
Yeah, I think.
What are your thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah. So my thoughts are that I think this move could actually fundamentally change the way that the student experiences learning. I think that's, for me, is probably the most important thing. We made an example offline, me and you, of the fact that when in our maths class we were probably imagining other things because we just couldn't relate to the subject.
I was in outer space in my maths class because I couldn't relate to the way it was being taught as well.
Exactly, and you couldn't relate it to the real world. So what you see with digitization and virtual education is a teacher can then, using smart boards, play a video that can take a student to a specific area that shows them how this thing is applicable. I mean, if you're studying the practical application
in
of
real
all this
life,
stuff, through using games, through using animation, through using very interactive methods, using these pieces of technology to deliver this content. I mean, one example I can think of, when I was studying geography, we were talking about volcanoes. We don't have volcanoes in South Africa, right? But if you can use virtual environments to then take students inside a volcano, see the actual lava, can you imagine the amount of interest that's going to generate in that kid to want to explore some things
I mean,
like
I remember
tornadoes.
falling asleep in my history class because it was just boring facts and stories. But if you bring that to life in a documentary, there are wonderful documentaries on the internet that you can source, and you bring those stories to life where you can actually meet the characters that are being discussed. That just adds so much value to the learning experience.
100%. And for me, that will be the greatest achievement of this, to make this a lot less intimidating for kids, the process of learning a lot less intimidating, get people a lot more interested to go deeper in their subjects and become better students and therefore better contributors to the betterment of the continent.
Well, thank you so much for your time today and for that very insightful discussion.
No, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.